time is now. It breathes as we breathe, like a single heartbeat. Can you guys show me your heartbeat? The single heartbeat of life and love. And you know what that makes us all? One very big family. So that's our story today. What a powerful web that you have created, huh? It's so powerful that I can promise you that when you are sad or lonely, raise your hand if you have ever felt sad or lonely before. Sometimes it feels like we're the only people in the whole world sometimes, right? But let our web that we have created together be a reminder to you that you are never alone and that we are bound together in this great web of love, always. And it's up to us to be good caretakers of it. So remember those who love you and remind someone this week just how much you love them. Valentine's Day is around the corner, and I know there are different feelings about Valentine's Day, but let it be just one more opportunity maybe to show someone that you love them. And now, speaking of that web that connects all of life, it's time to head out now and to show our earth a little bit of that same love. So Rebecca is helping to untangle the web of relationship. And then we will head out to be earth carers. And maybe we can help sing them out, everyone.
Through the sharing of our joys and our sorrows, we create a sacred space where we are deeply present with ourselves and with one another. This is a time for us to briefly but fully share those life milestones that fill us with joy or hope, or those pains and losses that fill us with heartache and heartbreak. If you have a joy or a sorrow to share, in a moment, I invite you to come forward to this microphone, speak your name, and then share your joy or sorrow. Alternatively, you can raise your hand and we will bring the handheld microphone to you. As we begin our sharing, we light a candle of joy, knowing that a joy shared is a joy magnified, and also a candle of sorrow, knowing that a sorrow shared is a burden lightened. Let us open our hearts to one another.
Hi, Pat Artis. I just wanted to remember Stevie this morning. Most of us who've been following on Facebook know he's been sick or he's in the hospital. He usually sits over there in 81 with Lynn Rose. So let's think about Stevie this morning.
And speaking of Stevie, Lynn is in the chat box and she says, hello from the hospital with Stevie. He is slowly on the mend. He's well enough to be totally annoyed by all of the needles and the poking.
As we end our sharing, we light a final candle representing all of those joys and all of those sorrows that we hold silently in the sanctuary of our hearts. May the light of these candles and the compassion of this community remind us that wherever we are on our journey, each of us is worthy of love, and each of us is able to love. Let's take a deep breath together, returning again to that spirit of life and love that moves within, between, and beyond us all. Take a breath in, breath out, releasing some small bit of tension from your body, your heart, your mind. Breathe in, breathe out. And with this shared breath moving between us, let us enter a time of silent meditation. Will you lift your hearts and join me in the spirit of prayer, listening in these words for the language of faith most meaningful to you? Eternal presence, known by many names, known in many ways, known as an abiding love, as a great mystery, as a friend, as a parent, as a lover, as the animal kindred that remind us we are parts of this interconnected web of life, spirit of life. Be with us today. Be with us in this turning of the year, in these times of cold wind. We open our hearts to all of those who have struggled in this cold, those who struggle with housing, our animal kindred who also struggle with the cold. May we care for one another in these cold times and in all times. We open our hearts to those among us who are struggling with their health, especially our dear friend Stevie. We hope that he and all those who struggle may be blessed with comfort and peace and health and healing. We open our hearts with joy as light returns to this corner of planet Earth. For many of us, for some of us, light and warmth is growing in our hearts or our lives. May we have moments of gratitude and appreciation where we notice the wonders of the world, where we notice the love shared in small acts of kindness. We pray this for love's sake. Amen. And blessed be. As we remain seated, I invite you to join me in singing There Is a Love. The words are in your order of service. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. We are a tradition that finds truth and meaning in many sources: world religions, direct experience, the life and teachings of great prophetic leaders. Today's readings connect us to our Christian roots, which in turn connect us to roots from the Jewish tradition. So our first reading is from the Christian scripture of Mark. I said Luke, but I meant Mark, because this story shows up in 3 of the Gospels in slightly different ways. And in this version, in the book of Mark, Jesus is offering teachings, and this section is often called the first commandment. Hear these words. One of the scribes came near and heard them, disputing with one another. And seeing that he answered them well, he asked him, "Which commandment is first of all?" Jesus answered, "The first is, 'Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength.' The second is this, 'You shall love your neighbor as yourself.' There is no commandment greater than these." Our second reading comes to us from Howard Thurman, one of the great 20th century American Christian theologians, though he resisted the word theologian. African-American man born in 1899, he was the first person in his town to graduate from 8th grade. And he went on to become a professor and chaplain and doctor of theology and minister at Howard University, and then here at Boston University. This reading is from his volume, Meditations from the Heart, Meditations of the Heart, and it is titled, "Thou Shalt Love." Thou shalt love thy God. There must be, for me, a deep sense of relatedness to God. This relatedness is the way by which there shall open for me more and more springs of energy and power, which will enable me to thread life's mysteries with life's clue. It is this and this alone that will make it possible for me to stand anything that life can or may do to me. I shall not waste my effort in trying to reduce God to my particular logic. Here in the quietness, I shall give myself in love to God. Thou shalt love thy neighbor. How I must seek ever the maintenance of the kind of relatedness to others that will feed the springs of kindness and sympathy in me. I shall study how I may be tender without being soft, gracious without being ingratiating, kind without being sentimental, and understanding without being judgmental. Here in the quietness, I shall give myself in love to my neighbors. Thou shalt love thyself. I must learn to love myself with detachment. I must have no attitude toward myself that contributes to my own delinquency. I shall study how so to love myself, that in my attitude toward myself, I shall be pleasing to God and face with confidence what He requires of me. Here in the quietness, I give myself over to the kind of self-regard that would make me whole and clean in my own sight and in the sight of God. Thou shalt love thy God, thy neighbor, thyself. When the Montgomery bus boycott began in 1995, a young Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King stepped onto the scene as a national leader in the civil rights movement. He was supported by his many communities of family and friends, his amazing wife, the faith communities that had been part of his life in the South, in Boston. He was supported by his academic training at Howard University and Boston University. And he carried in his pocket a book by Howard Thurman, who had served as a chaplain and professor at Boston University while King was pursuing his PhD. The book he carried was titled Jesus and the Disinherited, published in 1949. And it begins with these powerful words from Howard Thurman. Many and varied are the interpretations dealing with the teachings and the life of Jesus of Nazareth. But few of these interpretations deal with what the teachings and the life of Jesus have to say to those who stand at a moment in human history with their backs against the wall. This is a text written for the disinherited at this moment in history when he writes it mid-20th century. By looking backwards at Jesus as a figure coming out of communities of the disinherited. Thurman positions Jesus in time and history and context in a different way than mainstream theologians had. He highlights how in the Christian tradition, Jesus comes into human form and human community. In a community that is poor, that is outcast in many ways, that is denied the citizenship privileges of being part of the Roman world. It is into this community that Jesus is born and learns and begins his teachings and his ministry. It's a personal book, Jesus and the Disinherited. Yes, it has great academic moments and ways of connecting different ideas. It's also a time where Thurman talks about his own upbringing and his greatest spiritual teacher, who was his grandmother, a woman born into slavery, whose version of Christianity was grounded in the idea that all people are children of God, even the enslaved, even people having the Bible quoted at them as a way to stay in an oppressed state. All of us are a child of God. This is the message Thurman receives from his grandmother, a message of the inherent worth and dignity of all human beings, a reminder of our own goodness. And we see this throughout Howard Thurman's writing, the idea that love is at least trifold: love of self, affirmation of our own goodness, love of God, which for Thurman is a relationship to sustenance, to spiritual grounding, and love of thy neighbor. It's interesting in this reading from the Gospels to love God and love one's neighbor as oneself. It doesn't literally say to love yourself as a commandment, but it's implied. How can we love our neighbor open-heartedly, courageously, boldly, compassionately as ourselves if we don't love ourselves? So Thurman's work consistently connects the idea of tending to one's inward spirituality and tending to our neighbors. Thurman is sometimes described as the chaplain of the civil rights movement. He was not someone who was on the ground, in the streets, at the front lines of the movement. He wasn't the community organizer that King and his colleagues learned from. He was a spiritual teacher, a man who dedicated his life to teaching in all sorts of contexts, in kind of homegrown schools to universities, teaching through his writing and his poetry and his profound gift of mentorship. As some scholars have said, Thurman saw spiritual cultivation as necessary accompaniment to social activism. And truly, King and his generation of leaders and all those who have read Thurman can relate to that. That his words, his reflections, and his actions open up a space for us to go deeper in our loving relationship to one another and to ourselves and to God. Now, when I begin my prayers, I always say, listen in these words for the language of faith most meaningful to you. I know that Christian theology might not be what resonates most with all of you. So I invite you to reframe as necessary to seek within Thurman's story and theology something that resonates for you. As he himself says, I shall not waste any effort in trying to reduce God to my particular logic. So I invite you during this service to connect with the Christian tradition through Thurman in a way that resonates for you, perhaps thinking about that larger reality or the interdependent web of life, which isn't, I'm not saying that's directly the same as God, but connecting to something beyond the human community. Thurman calls us to love that which is greater than the human community, intertwined with that love of community. So Thurman, in his teaching and his reflections, he's calling and challenging people to cultivate their own inward spirituality. And he writes in an essay about the discipline of love, how we practice love. He poses the question, what is the nature of the kind of discipline that love provides? And he answers, it is something I must quite deliberately want to do. And I must find the opening or openings through which my love can flow into the life of the other, and at the same time locate in myself openings through which this love, his love, can flow into me. Friends on the journey, in this month when we take on the theme of love, I invite you to think about how you can open up channels of love within your own being. Thurman's theology is deeply relational. And so can you open a channel of relationship to your understanding of God, a loving God that reminds us we are all children of this universe? In this season, in this month, when we reflect on love, can you open up a channel to love thy neighbor? Perhaps an actual neighbor. Did folks call one another on Friday night when it got so terribly cold? Perhaps we can open up channels to love our neighbors where the channel takes the form of an organization that we support. Or perhaps we open up channels of love whenever we truly attend to conversations, listening with kindness and sympathy, as he says. This is so key to Thurman's work. He talks elsewhere about what love feels like, it feels like being seen, like being acknowledged, being understood. That's the power of this seminal text. Jesus and the disinherited, in those words, he says, not only do I, Howard Thurman, see you, but Jesus Christ sees you through his own lived experience, an affirmation that each of us matter. And perhaps in this season, you can open up channels to love oneself. admit I have mixed feelings about some of these words. I quoted the idea that I must love myself with detachment and have no attitude toward myself that contributes to my own delinquency. Not all those words resonate with me. But if we go back to this biblical passage of love our neighbor as oneself, everything he says about loving one's neighbor can also be applied to oneself. So in this exhortation to love thy neighbor, he says to seek ever the maintenance of the kind of relations to others that will feed the springs of kindness and sympathy in me, to be tender without being soft, gracious without being ingratiating. Perhaps this February, you can open a channel of love to yourself that is grounded in this feeling of kindness, of being tender without being soft. Friends on the journey, love has ever overflowing streams. Thurman reminds us that we can be part of moving love from community to community, heart to heart. And as the sun grows in this season, and as waters will begin to flow through streams even more this spring, may this be a time where we open our hearts to love thy neighbor, love thyself, love this precious interdependent web of life. Amen. And blessed be. Our next hymn is number 34, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire. This hymn is also grounded in one of the traditions of love found in the Bible. Part of the words come from Paul's letter to the Corinthians, often quoted at weddings, actually written to a community that's trying to figure out how to get along. So love takes all these different forms between a couple, within a community, and in how we live our values in the world. So let's rise in body or spirit and sing hymn number 34, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire. may be seated.
We drink from wells we did not dig, and we worship in a sanctuary we did not build. As a voluntary association, our church is sustained through the gifts of the members and friends of our congregation. Every week when we stand up and say the words of our covenant to each other, I think pondering on what Rebecca's message to us today, in that moment, I think is when I feel the most connected to the congregation, when we affirm those words of our shared convictions and belief, and those words draw us together time and time again. Those words have power, and they have programs, and they have facilities, and they have buildings, and they have people, all of which needs care and investment. And this is the moment when we get to do perhaps the most fundamental of expressions of love, which is to do the thing that sustains the words of our covenant and allows it to be put into action. So giving of ourselves, giving of our hearts, and giving of our treasure is a part of how we express love for each other and love of this congregation. You can give online by going to ufpc.org and clicking on the donate button, or you can place a donation in the offering plate that will be passed around briefly. If this is your first time worshiping with us, please let the offering plate pass you by. Your presence here today is your gift to us, and we hope you will join us following the service for social hour in the parish hall. May the ushers come forward for the morning offering to support the good works of United First Parish Church. May it be joyfully given, knowing that it will be gratefully received.
Thank you. Here at United First Parish Church, we gather in many ways for worship and spiritual growth, for creative expression and small groups, and to be in multi-generational community and to contribute to the wider part of our community through acts of service and social justice. As always, you can read about our ongoing and upcoming programs in your announcement insert, which is also emailed to the congregation. Of note for today, the writing group is meeting around 12 in the parlor, which is the room on the stage. Jim Potosa facilitates that group. So if you want to nourish your creative expression, please go to that today. Also, for today, a note from the Social Justice Action Committee that for folks in Quincy, this Tuesday is a special election for voters in Ward 4 to replace the outgoing Ward 4 city councilor. There's 2 final candidates. Your polling locations are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Tuesday. So for folks in Ward 4, please take this opportunity to participate in our democratic community beyond the congregation. Bonnie Gorman will have some information about the vote available at a social justice action table in the parish hall. Thank you, Bonnie. Now I invite Carl to come and give a spotlight announcement on behalf of the Stewardship Committee.
So some years ago, we had, believe it or not, a very cold winter. And we found ourselves looking at our budget and saying, we're going to be paying a lot for heat this year. And this was sort of right on the heels of the battle over marriage equality and our effort as a congregation to put front and center the fact that love is love. Love is vital. It is what we're based on. And so we came up with the idea of this Light Our Fire fundraiser, with the idea of celebrating that fire of love that holds us together. And this has become an institutional tradition. We're changing it up a little bit this year, and we're going to have a Light Our Fire luncheon next Sunday at 11:45. And sort of carrying on from the changes that got made as COVID spun through, we'll have another Light Our Fire dinner with a service auction in March, but I'm not going to talk about that. Next week, 11:45, we're going to have a chili cook-off. We're going to have a chocolate celebration. So chili cook-off, people who like to make chili, people who like to eat chili, come bring your favorite chili. We'll have some judges to choose between them. That's the cook-off part of it. And everybody will get to have whichever ones they like. Or you can bring potluck something else. We'll have some veggie platters and stuff like that. We'll get together at 11:45. We'll spend the lunchtime together. If you want to help support the church, because part of this has been sort of the theme today, is to support, to show our love by contributing to the community of love that we are in. And so if you want to support that monetarily, one way you can do that is to bring some sort of chocolate creation. It could be a cake, could be chocolate lollipops, could be whatever chocolate thing. And so celebration of chocolate is sort of a code word for celebration of love, because what else makes you feel warm and wonderful? Love and chocolate, they're sort of synonymous. So that's 11:45 next week. Hope to see all of you there. Bring your friends. We're going to have a great time. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. And also Kim and Marie Louise and Peter Kovac are some of the folks in our planning team for that. And you can sign up to bring in chili or chocolate at a table in the parish hall. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Let's return to that breath of life and love. And I invite you to rise as you're willing and able, and place your hands over your heart for our words of benediction. And these are words by Frederick Gillis. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us, now and always. May we go in peace and go in love to be a blessing to the world. I invite you to turn towards the center aisle and offer one another a shared benediction as we sing Carry the Flame and I extinguish our chalice. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Blessed be.